your number may not be what you think it is. Sitting down and looking at assumptions over your life expectancy, future tax rates, investment returns can be downright daunting. But it's still something that is necessary to give you an idea of what you need to be able to have to separate from the workforce. Now, knowing your number is an interesting concept, and truly, you may find that knowing your number, it may not be the number that you once thought it was. We're going to talk about that on Consider This Program today. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Adam Harter.
Happy to have you along. Adam is our Chief Investment Officer at the Financial Enhancement Group. He is a CFA. So remember, I'm a certified financial planner if you're new to the show. We come at life in a different way. I get to serve the role of the managing partner, so I'm more of an entrepreneurial, strategic planning, big visionary, and Adam loves details that absolutely drive me nuts. That's why we're partners. We lead the team of 38 really, really qualified and great people that do some extraordinary work. Consider This Program is designed to give you things to consider. That's what we're going to try to do. There was a company that was out there that had I think it was ING, that actually had a whole marketing campaign. This is back when I was teaching at Purdue, so that was 2007 to 2015. And it was Know Your Number. And they'd have this billboard and have people come up and try to say what the number was. And I remember walking in, again, strategic planning visionary, you would think I would have a number. I remember walking into your office, Adam, at the old building in Anderson and saying, I don't have a number. How can people have a number? And you looked at me and said, I have a number.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's the differences between the two of us. So let's talk about how you came to get to your number, how you knew what that would be.
Well, I think one difference is that was probably 15 years ago.
That's true. That's true.
And at 25 or whatever age that was, a number is easier to get to. And so at that point in time, your number, which is what you think you need at a certain age to retire, I had that number just by doing the same math that we all do.
Right.
You use the 4% safe withdrawal rate at the age you think you're going to retire, back into what that number needs to be, which converts that into how much you need to be saving to get there. I think they're somewhat useful for a 25-year-old. I don't have a number anymore.
I feel better knowing that.
Yeah. I agree. I don't know what purpose that serves. It did to a 25-year-old. To give you a motivation to begin putting it in, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah. So what are the things that Adam and I and Aaron, who you hear on here every now and then, Aaron Rayum is our Director of Financial Planning, and Grant Sullivan's our Manager of Operations, and our planning team really put together what we call a retirement budget to help you get to this number. And would you agree, Adam, as a CFA, that the biggest components really are what we talked about: life expectancy, rate of return, the taxation today and what's in the future, and then what you need for distribution? Would you say those are the big four?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we added, I just want to make sure, because every now and then you have something that's different. We've got a program we call Next Steps at the Financial Enhancement Group, where we're able to put those assumptions, if you will, in, right? And assumptions scare me because, Bad News Bears was right up my alley when I was, in junior high. And I remember watching the coach write assume, on the board and then underlining the three parts and going, okay, so it got me very, very early not to do that. But we help people put together a retirement budget, and I won't fib. I haven't had a home budget since I had more month than I had money. Now we have a business budget, that's different. But from a home one, I try to work on this all the time. And that's really where I'm going with my number, is trying to figure out, based on what's coming in, what percentage we want for charitable gifting, what percentage we want for taxes, what goes into savings, and what are Barb and I able to spend and not feel bad about it, and just enjoy the life that we want to choose. One of my friends says you can spend as much as you want on anything you want as long as you mercilessly cut any other thing that's not necessary, right? And it's probably true if you think about most people's lives. But why don't you walk them through how a retirement budget works and what fixed and social expenses mean?
Yeah, so a retirement budget, what it's going to take for you to maintain your standard of living. All right, so to even get to the end result, that is the absolute most crucial crucial component, is to have some certainty around what it is it's going to cost you. And you really have to break that down into different categories. And we see a good example of that today through inflation, something that we didn't worry about for 20 years. And for the first time in 20 years, people are at least respecting that. And so just as a quick aside, going to those assumptions, for many years, we just plugged in a simple 2%. Not we here at Financial Enhancement Group, but we as an industry would plug in a simple 2% inflation rate without testing that through other variables. Now, all of a sudden, we say, hey, whatever happens, it probably makes some sense to test that thing out at 3 or 4. And that gets into that retirement budget and why we think it's so important to break your budget down into a couple of different categories. The first of which are fixed costs, those things that it's going to cost to carry your household, regardless of what you're going to do. You're going to need to eat. You're going to need shelter. You're going to need a certain set of transportation to and from doctor's appointments, whatever that is for your household. You're going to have a fixed standard of living, and that fixed standard of living is probably going to inflate at a pretty decent rate. It's going to grow over time. And utilities, obviously, a big piece of that. Then on the other hand of that, we have what we call our social expenses. Those are more flexible. Those are things that are choices. It's going to be whether that's travel in your case, whether it's sports, whatever it may be. You're going to have a certain social spending that tends to decline over time. We don't want to assume a high rate of inflation because typically we find you lose energy, you lose the ability to get out and do those things. So therefore that becomes over time a smaller piece of your budget. So separating those two helps us get a more dynamic view into what it's going to take to support a standard of living all the way through the end of that life expectancy.
Yeah, so some key things you said there. Notice that retirement planning is not about replacing a percentage of your income. That's a nice little sweet thing that we both learned in the CFP studies and the CFA studies. It's what they tried to get me to teach poor kids at Purdue. It's just not accurate. You don't need a percentage of your income. You listening to this show are unique. For those of you that are on one of our radio stations, you're up at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday trying to improve your finances. Right? Those of you who are listening to the podcast could be doing anything else, but you're listening to this podcast to try to improve your financial journey. You are not like the average person driving down the road. You've got some discretionary income likely that you have chosen to put into the investment world, and you're just trying to figure this journey out. So what we're trying to do is to give you our wisdom and guidance that we've been able to see that comes from this. You don't need to replace a certain percentage of your income, right? What you need is 100% of your standard of living. And it's, when Adam talked about that social expenses, sometimes when people come in, they get a little nervous about that. But I really want you to not think about yourself for a second, but think about your peer group. What we know nationally is discretionary income begins to decline at 65. Distributions in our practice have always been 68, right? That's when people stop taking out as much money. And I'll give you the 3 reasons why. The first one obviously is a great thing. You can't get away from the grandkids, right? I've got people who've actually left one spouse at home and one's gone to Florida or Arizona for the winter, just because they weren't into that. And that by year 2 or 3, they're back together again one way or another, and they're flying back and forth more, right? So the first one is you can't get away from grandkids. The second one's sad. You can't get away from a doctor. You've got plans. We probably have 15 or 20 people that I take care of this year that have always gone to Florida that just can't go to Florida anymore. And then the last one, which really worried me, Adam, with COVID, is the comfy couch just feels too comfy. You talked about energy. You just don't have the energy to go to Hawaii anymore or to, go to the airport to try to get to that bucket list trip to Italy, right? And so when we have a lot of engineers that Adam and the Financial Enhancement Group take care of, and we'll have people come in who will extrapolate that inflation rate on both their fixed and social expenses because nobody's taught them to break it down. And they need $6 zillion if they live to be 95. And as a result, they work longer than they should, die with more money than they should, and don't have the life that they earned, the life that they should have deserved. So I'll take it back to you, but that's really, this is really, really near and dear to both of our hearts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And just taking you back to why it's so difficult to come up with that number. And I'll just give you one simple thought experiment. So for me, it comes right back down to maintaining that standard of living. And one of those fixed expenses is utility, right? You have to not only have shelter, but keep it running operated. Well, look around today. I mean, more and more people have solar panels up in their roof. All right. So rather than have $25, $50, or $100,000 extra in an investment account, if that's up on your roof producing a certain amount of kilowatts, well, you're helping maintain your standard of living that way. That was why it's much more difficult to come down to an actual number. If there's things that we can do, assets that we can purchase that are maintaining that in a different way.
And that's really, I'm a big advocate of investing in health. Right. People say, well, are you sure you're really going to live longer? You're missing part of it. How long I live is really up to God. Right. There's some things that I can do to influence it, I believe. But the point is, when I make investments in medical work and vitamins and in my gym downstairs today, I think it's going to reduce my medical cost later on. And I think one of the biggest unknowns for people in my age demographic really is, what are those unknown healthcare costs? Right? The peak of the baby boom was 1957 to 1961. I was born in 64. So I am fairly certain Medicare rules, Social Security rules are not going to change for people born before 1961. They're at the age where they vote and are getting ready. They're planning on Medicare, right? I mean, when you're 57, do the math at how old you are. They are planning on Medicare, and they represent a large constituency of the United States population. My case, I'm on the downside of that turn, right? And so I am concerned with what our healthcare costs are going to be. You talk about putting in the solar panels. I would talk about spending time with a trainer and a gym. Taking care of my bodies. One, it should lead to a better quality of life now. But two, more importantly, it should be able to reduce those medical costs later on. If you want to know more about this, you can go to our website. We write an article every week. Dean Huddleston is one of our advisors up in Lafayette. He took this concept, wrote an article. All you have to do is go to yourlifeafterwork.com/is there a magic retirement number. If you have any problems finding it, you can call Brittany at 800-928-4001. And don't forget, while you're at our website, yourlifeafterwork.com, get signed up for a complimentary Next Steps meeting. We'll give you our best thoughts for what you should consider today, what you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. 800-928-4001, yourlifeafterwork.com.